On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're talking Giants draft. What else? With Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, I promised Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View, would be here. He is here. We're going to talk draft. The draft is, boy, Ed, it's just a couple of days away. I mean, where has the time gone? I mean, are you as tired of mock draft season as I am?
Absolutely, Patty. I've done, I don't know, too many, way too many. I'm tired of even thinking about it. But you know, what are we going to talk about after Saturday? What are we going to do?
Way too early 2026 mock drafts?
Oh, please. Oh, please. But you're probably right.
Goodness. Oh, gosh. But anyway, we've got a few more thoughts. You know, as we're getting closer, things are kind of getting a little more clear, I think, for the Giants. And Ed, let's start with, you know, this whole notion about the quarterback situation. I know some people saw that the Giants, you know, oh my gosh, they're doing these last minute workouts with these three quarterbacks. They're going to take one of them. Do you think, Ed, now we know at 3, the Giants probably won't take a quarterback, but do you think perhaps there is a possibility that they might try to trade back into the bottom of the first round to grab one of these quarterbacks that they have been working out?
Oh, absolutely. There's a possibility, Patty. In my final mock draft on Sunday at Big Blue View, that's exactly what I did. I traded back into the first round to get Jackson Dart. Now, look, some people really like Shedeur Sanders. You know, if you look at Ward and then Sanders as 1-2, some people are Jackson Dart fans. Some people are Jalen Milroe fans. Some people are Tyler Shuck fans. The Giants have done a really good job here of not sort of tipping their hand in terms of who they might like or not like. If they like one of these guys, if they really like one of these guys and really believe in one of these guys, why wouldn't they try to get ahead of Pittsburgh, or why wouldn't they try to get ahead of the Rams? You know, if they think the Rams might take a quarterback at 26, or, you know, I remain convinced that the Browns are going to take a quarterback at 33. So if there's a guy they really like, why wouldn't they try to get ahead of the Browns to get the guy that they want instead of take the leftovers? So, but we don't know if there's a guy that they're really, really committed to. If there is, why wouldn't they go get him though?
Right. You know, one scenario I know I laid out on New York Giants on SI, I could see the Browns, who basically have identical draft assets as the Giants, with, you know, the exception of a couple of extra picks. I can't help but wonder if maybe the Browns might try to trade up to get their quarterback and try to outduel the Giants and get into a bidding war. And the number that I identified for the trade up is 20, which is where Denver sits. That's one spot ahead of Pittsburgh. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think the odds are that Cleveland says, okay, you know what? We're not going to sit on our hands. We're going to see if we can get up, because we know the Giants want a quarterback. We want a quarterback. We have pretty much the same draft capital, you know, for the most part. What do you think the odds are that maybe it becomes a bidding war and the Giants, just because they don't have maybe as many assets as Cleveland, they just say, you know what, we're out?
That's absolutely possible, Patty, because I do think that the Browns will be looking for a quarterback. I think from everything that I've heard from people I talk to in Cleveland and from what you hear, um, from I think it was the general manager Andrew Barry in Cleveland the other day. I think Cleveland is all in on Jalen Milroe. So if they think that, if they think the Giants would aggressively go get Milroe, or if they think Pittsburgh might go after Milroe, then absolutely they might try to trade up. But this is what makes it fascinating. Cleveland has, in some respects, the same needs that the Giants have. The Giants and Cleveland pick back to back. They have roughly the same draft capital. So that's fascinating to see which one of those teams decides to be aggressive, and to see if, like you said, if they go to Denver, which one of those teams would make the best offer. And it's also fascinating, Patty, because you've studied it just as much as I have. There are so many scenarios. Jackson Dart could go 9 to the Saints. He could fall to the second round. Jalen Milroe could go in the first round. He could fall to the third round. Tyler Shuck could go in the first round. He could fall to the fourth round. It's fascinating to see how it all plays out, and to see how, Joe Shane and the Giants read the tea leaves.
Ed, what is your gut feeling? I mean, could you see the Giants potentially trading out of the third spot?
Potentially. I don't think so, Patty.
Mm-hmm.
When we talked to Joe the other day, Joe was adamant about the idea of not passing on a blue chip prospect. So I have a hard time seeing Joe willingly, move out of 3 and give up on the idea of getting Abdul Carter or, Travis Hunter if he happens to be there. Unless they're more committed to one of these quarterbacks than I think right now. Maybe they trade down to, to 8 and take Shadur Sanders or Jackson Dart, which I think that's a little rich for me, but it's not my decision to make.
Right, right. I mean, what quarterback prospect would surprise you if the Giants were to take him either at the bottom of the first round, trade back up to get him, or even in the second round? Who would be your surprise pick?
I don't know if you call Tyler Shuck a surprise pick, Patty. I think I'd be surprised if anybody went and got him in the first round. What I'm curious about is what happens if the Giants, like we talked about, what happens if they try to trade up and Cleveland makes a better offer to Atlanta or Denver or Seattle or whoever, to get up and get the quarterback that they want. What happens if the Giants look at their options at 34 and decide, maybe we'll take a shot. Maybe we'll just, Tyler Shuck's not worth it at 34 if he's the one that's left. We'll take a player in the trenches, for example, and we'll get a quarterback later. I'm fascinated, from that next tier, who would be the guy. I'm going to guess, because he's the only guy they had in for a 30 visit, I'm going to guess that it would be Kyle McCord, if they went later. But I'm fascinated to see, what they would do if they miss out on that first group.
Yeah, I am too. And by the way, I think Kyle McCord is a prospect that I don't think a lot of people are attaching to the Giants, but someone we probably should maybe pay a little bit more attention to. Because everybody's saying, oh, it's going to be Jalen Milroe. Oh, it's going to be Shador Sanders. Oh, it might be Tyler Shuck. I think
Patty,
McCord is somebody to keep an eye on.
You can't read, these 30 visits that you hear about and all of that, they're not the be all and end all. But for me, it sort of raises It catches my attention when you look at the list of 30 visits that the Giants have had. The only quarterback outside of that group of 5 that they've, if you include Cam Ward, outside of that group that they've had private workouts with and all of that, the only other quarterback they had in for a visit is Kyle McCord.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets my attention.
Mm-hmm.
If they get to round 3 and they're looking for a quarterback, if they get to 99 or 105 and they haven't taken a quarterback and McCord is there, the fact that he's the only other one to visit has gotten my attention without a doubt.
Gotten my attention too, and as has some whispers that have been floating in the air. So we'll have to see. Obviously, if the Giants go in that direction, who knows? Maybe they sit tight and they get the illusion that they want to trade up just to get Cleveland out of the way, and then they swoop in and they get their guy. I mean,
You never know.
The knife. Yeah,
like
exactly.
I said, Patty, there's so many scenarios here, and I'm so fascinated because I really think that, Joe Shane is under pressure from 2 directions. He has to field a better product in 2025. He has to. And, John Mara is not saying you have to make the playoffs, but they have to be representative in 2025. For me, you can't take a quarterback at number 3 who's going to be your 3rd string quarterback in week 1. You have to take the best player you can get. And then, but the other part of that is John Mara said the biggest thing we have to do this offseason is find our quarterback of the future, which tells me, and I'm sure it tells you, that there's some impatience.
Yeah.
Joe has never taken a swing at a quarterback in the draft, and I know maybe some of that had to do with Daniel Jones and all of that, but there's some impatience within the organization to put someone in place who could possibly be the franchise quarterback of the future. So I think he's under pressure from 2 directions. I think he's got to figure out a way to do both.
Hey, Giant fans, there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Game Time's all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you'll pay. Whether you're looking for tickets to sports events, theater, comedy, concerts, or whatever, Game Time has you covered. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, we're talking with Ed Valentine at Big Blue View. And Ed, let's turn to day 2. We kind of danced a little into day 2 before. Let's talk more about it. So let's assume the Giants go Abdul Carter in round 1. Round 2, whether they trade up or they stay put, they get their quarterback. What makes the most sense based on need, based on the depth, as far as, what the Giants might do with the 2 third-round picks that they have?
Patty, I don't know. I don't know if they'll have a pick at 34. If they do, maybe they use it as a quarterback. If they pass, there's a couple of obvious things that have to happen here, whether it's at 34, 65, 99, 105. The Giants have got to address the trenches. They just have to. Offensive line, defensive line. I've said this over and over and over. In Joe's first 3 drafts, he's never used a draft pick before the 5th round on a defensive lineman. I can't imagine the Philadelphia Eagles going 3 years without using premium draft resources on the defensive line. I just can't imagine, teams like that, going that far. That has to change. That has to be addressed. There have to be premium resources put into the defensive line. You look at the offensive line, and the Giants did a good job a year ago bringing in some veteran guys to sort of, piece the thing together and make it functional. But where's the young talent? Where's the pipeline? Where are the developmental guys? Where are the guys who can step in for Greg Van Roten? Inevitably Greg Van Roten, who's 35 years old, at some point his play is going to fall off a cliff. Where are the guys who could, if they decide to move on from John Runyon and Jermaine Illuminor, who have no more guaranteed money after this year, where are the guys who could step in for them in a year? So to me, like I said, whether it's 34, whether it's 34 to 105, maybe even 154, I mean, you've got to use some picks and some premium picks on the trenches. You just have to.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And after the trenches, assuming that's how they go, how would you stack up? And I know it's going to depend on who's on the board, but in terms of prioritizing the remaining needs that you would ideally like to see addressed, how would you stack those up?
Patty, I think for me, once you get past the trenches, I'd like to see, and if you're getting Abdul Carter, you take the edge need off the table. But here's the thing, in all these mock draft scenarios that I've run, that I keep coming back to, the Giants have added nothing on offense except for the quarterback position. They brought back Darius Slayton. They brought back the same offensive line. They have the same offense right now, except for the quarterback position. I feel like, I don't know if it's going to be a running back. I don't know if it's going to be a wide receiver. I think it's really unlikely it would be a tight end. But somewhere along the way, I would not be surprised. Maybe it's at 65. I don't know, but I wouldn't be shocked if somewhere along the way they go try to grab an offensive weapon. I really wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Depending on how the board falls. To me, that's because they haven't added any. And if you're grabbing Abdul Carter at 3, you're not adding an offensive weapon either. So
right.
So I wonder, for me, I guess that's the thing that sticks out is, are they going to make a play to get an offensive weapon somewhere?
So you're thinking a receiver maybe to complement Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, depending on how the value falls. I mean, I think, there's a couple of running backs to supplement, Tyrone Tracy that interest me as well. But I'm thinking about a receiver, if there's one there that they look at, that's at 65 and is just, too much value for them to pass up.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. What about defensively? I mean, obviously in free agency, Joe Shane spent a lot of time on the defensive side of the ball, adding to those guys and whatnot. But can you see him potentially adding more on that side?
Sure, Patty. I mean, Abdul Carter we talked about, but you can always add corner depth. You can add safety depth. I keep coming back to that one because you do have Javon Holland, you do have Tyler Nubin, but to me, Dane Belton has never really grabbed a job there. So you could easily add some safety depth. If we heard rumblings earlier in the offseason that maybe they were unhappy with Bobby Okereke. So maybe somewhere along the way, if there's an off-ball linebacker that you really like, you can do that. I hate to see them take another 7th round flyer on on an off-ball linebacker who just plays special teams. They did that last year, and they added a couple of those guys in free agency this year. So, I mean, how many of those guys do you need? But, you can, when you look at the Giants roster, Patty, it's hard to argue, no matter what they do. It's hard to argue that there's not a place, if it's a good player, it's hard to argue that there's not a place for that player.
Hey, Giant fans, did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops and Avowed, as easily as you stream your favorite TV shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With Wi-Fi 6/6E and auto low latency mode advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds you need to stay competitive. And you get endless entertainment thanks to 4K streaming that gives you smooth access to more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. So go on and head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Ed, I want to go back to Abdul Carter for a moment, because there's a lot of people who seem to think that if the Giants take Abdul Carter, that means Kayvon Thibodeaux is going to be traded. Do you see that happening, or do you see a world in which they can maybe go through this coming year with Thibodeaux, keeping in mind and acknowledging that, Thibodeaux hasn't been horrible, but, he hasn't maybe developed just yet into the impact player I think they were looking for, at least on a consistent basis, which partially is not his fault. It's due to injuries, but still, it's kind of slowed down for him a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think they're trading Kayvon Thibodeaux, Patty. I think if they draft Abdul Carter, I think Joe Shane's phone is going to ring. Mm-hmm. I think there will be, GMs who ask Joe if Kayvon is available. And if Joe's smart, he'll say, well, what do you want to give me? And if somebody wants to fork over a 1st-round pick, maybe you do that. But nobody's going to give up a 1st-round pick at this point for Kayvon. Kayvon Thibodeaux is a good player. All right. He's a good player. And the only problem that Kayvon Thibodeaux really has is that Kayvon Thibodeaux's production hasn't lived up to what you would have hoped for the number 5 overall pick. Hasn't been quite, to that level. But nonetheless, he's a good player. He does a lot of things for the Giants, in terms of physicality and run defense and ability to, he does have ability to rush the passer. I said 2 years ago, Patty, I said, if people were looking at Kayvon Thibodeaux and expecting double-digit sacks every single season, that they were setting themselves up to be disappointed. And it's kind of turning out that way. He's not a natural bend the edge, just blow past the defensive tackle with speed, kind of pass rusher. He's not that guy. So it's effort, it's power, it's cleaning up sacks when the quarterback has to move. That's the kind of pass rusher that he is. But I don't know about you, Patty. If Shane Bowen can't figure out how to get Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeaux, and Brian Burns on the field a good amount of time, then shame on him.
Yeah, exactly. And there's ways he could do it. I mean, I know we've discussed it here on this show. I've written about it over on New York Giants on SI. it's all a matter of how they play it out. But certainly there's a way to get all three on. And
Well,
it's like Ernie Accorsi once said, you could never have too many pass rushers.
we were disappointed somewhat a year ago, Patty, when we talked to Bowen about Azeez Ojulari and about using Ojulari as a third down pass rush specialist. And that, which would have made sense, but that role never really materialized. And I don't know how you do it. Maybe you do it, on passing downs. Maybe you do it with Dexter Lawrence as the only guy with his hand in the dirt, and you do it with the other three guys walking around. I don't know exactly how you do it. Maybe Abdul Carter plays off-ball linebacker on some early downs, at least occasionally. But if the Giants could figure out how to get Matthias Kiwanuka on the field in 2007, when they already had Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck, and Osi Umenyiora, then they can figure this out too. Plus, the other part of that is we don't know what the roster is going to look like in 2 years. So that's the thing I think people forget sometimes, Patty, is that we get so focused on this season, that it's not always just about this season. It's about, hey, maybe this guy can be a really good player for us for the next 8 to 10 years. So, the fact that maybe we had to do some shuffling to get guys on the field in the first year, so what?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, Ed, let's now turn to some, day 3 stuff, some other thoughts about the draft coming up. What are we not talking about, in your opinion, that you can see maybe being a possibility for the Giants?
Oh, I think, we covered a lot of the positions already, Patty. It's for me, it's, I love the idea when I do these mocks. I always keep coming back to, to developmental linemen late in the draft. Guys who might just be size guys. They might only have one or two characteristics that you love, but you need more guys in the trenches than you do any other position in on the field. And another thing that I've been asked about a bunch of times is would the Giants perhaps take a place kicker? Late in the draft, would they take a place kicker at 246 with their last pick? And I think there's only one or two guys that might even be considerations at place kicker, but I have to admit some surprise that Graham Gano is still on the football team at this point. I have to admit a little bit of surprise because I thought he would be a cap cut, back, even a while ago. So maybe that still happens. Maybe they draft somebody in the 7th round and either put him into competition with Gano or still maybe plan to move on from Graham. I don't know, because they are, the cap better than I do. They are, flirting after all the free agency moves that they've made. And yes, they have some restructures and all of that they can do. But if you look at the cap numbers right now, they have some work to do.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they would do that, maybe in the 7th round.
I mean, quite honestly, I'm surprised that, that Joaquin Nunez-Roches, I thought he might not make it through the spring, but he's still on the roster. So really the Giants didn't make any cap cuts.
No, they didn't. And I'm surprised by that, just like you are.
Maybe they're coming, who knows? But Ed, just some final thoughts here on the draft. What's the one thing that if the Giants don't do it, you're going to sit there and you're going to say, oh man, Joe, what were you thinking, man?
Oh, if they don't do it, I think it comes back to addressing the trenches in the first, in that first 105 picks, Patty. I really do, because look, Joe is on the offensive side. He's 1 for 4 on offensive linemen and didn't take one a year ago. Okay. He's 1 for 4. And John Michael Schmitz is an adequate starter at this point at best. Obviously, there's still room for growth. We don't know exactly what his career arc is going to look like, but Joe's 1 for 4. And John Michael Schmitz is the best one he's drafted. And he didn't draft an offensive lineman a year ago. And I talked earlier about the fact that he's never used more than a 5th round draft resource on the defensive line. And other than the mega contract he gave Dexter Lawrence to keep him in place, he hasn't exactly used big free agent resources on the defensive line either. So, and he didn't draft a defensive lineman last year. And Patty, you still win games in the trenches. And you can't go 2 years in a row without putting significant resources into the trenches. You just can't. So for me, that would be the unforgivable thing. If we're sitting here in round 7 and Joe is drafting somebody like Jerry Reese did years and years ago when he threw a 7th round pick at Adam Bisnawati, I think it was, years and years ago, just to say he had drafted an offensive lineman. And so I don't know, but to me that's the thing. The trenches have got to be addressed, and that's the one thing where I'll be shaking my head, wondering, what is going on here if he doesn't do that.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's why I kind of chuckle because, you read people who say, oh, the Giants invested, so many resources in the offensive line, but it hasn't worked out. And as far as I'm concerned, draft offensive line and defensive line every year.
Absolutely.
Worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But
Patty, as much as Joe gets a ton of credit for the players that he drafted in 2024, and you can't argue that he didn't draft good players. All the way through, he drafted good players. Even Darius Muasau, the 6th round pick as a linebacker, he showed some promise a year ago. But you can still say he still didn't really address getting some young players on the offensive and defensive lines, and he still didn't put a young quarterback on the roster. So there are still things he didn't get done.
And he's got to get them done if he wants to be back for 2026 and beyond.
Absolutely.
So big draft for the New York Giants. It gets underway on Thursday, and of course, we will have full coverage of it, as will Ed over on Big Blue View and Big Blue View Radio, where you can also check me out. I'm also going to be on Ed's show, so do check that out as well.
Yes, we're doing our own draft trade, right, Patty? We're doing our own draft trade.
Oh, we are?
Well, you're doing my show. I'm doing yours. It's our own draft trade.
Okay, yeah. We always do that. We always swap off because that's just what we do here. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. And I want to encourage you to check out Locked On NFL Draft. Damian Parson, Keith Sanchez. They're going to give you every little bit of information they know as we lead up to the draft. It starts Thursday. We're going to have expanded coverage for you on all 3 days. So hope you will check that out. And of course, don't forget to check out New York Giants on SI. For Ed Valentine, I'm Patricia Traina, Giant fans. We will see you tomorrow.